What's going on, guys? This is Chandler, and today I am here with Jon Seguin, who is another millionaire investor. And so I'm here at the Vegas event that Matt Mckeever put on, and it's been absolutely incredible. But when I first saw his video, I kind of prejudged him. I didn't even look at his stuff. And in this conference, I have been blown away by the content that he's putting out, the information, all of the investments, his construction company, and all kinds of crazy stuff that he's doing up in Canada. And so I wanted to interview him today and just kind of give all of you guys the rundown on it. So first off, why don't you just introduce yourself and tell kind of everybody what all you're going into, what you've been working on, your companies, just a little bit of everything.
Cool. So yeah, like you said, my name is Jon Seguin. I own a construction company, real estate investor definitely in the Canadian region, mainly southwestern Ontario. I started off kind of investing in Montreal, which is in Quebec, and doing condo developments. That was my first venture. Made a lot of money doing that. And then I took that money because I was concerned about, essentially, that was a very active role, right? In order to maintain the lifestyle that I was having and that those profits were generating, I needed to actively do that and repeat that yearly, and it was very unsecure. It was very hard for me to see, am I going to still be doing this in 20 years? And is this even going to be something I can do in 20 years? So I started looking at passive ways to invest and diversify kind of my money and do those kinds of things. And that's when I really kind of took my own situation under consideration, right? I was a student before that, and I lived in Montreal, which is a major city, kind of like Toronto or, like New York. Like those are the major cities in Canada. And I realized that the rents I were paying as a student, I could afford them. And I had this epiphany. I was like, listen, this is the affordability of a student. It doesn't matter whether I go to, Windsor, which is in like nowhere in Ontario, or I go to Toronto or Montreal. The fact is, if students can afford to pay these kinds of rents, it's really, transcends local economics. So I knew right away that that was the affordability of all students. So it was like looking at markets where maybe the housing market didn't reflect that level of income. So to give you a quick rundown, I would look at a typical student and what his household income was. So his disposable, which was minimum wage usually, and what the average, parents of a university grad or university student would make. And I was in the neighborhood of like 100,000, close to that. And then I would look for markets where the housing market would reflect like maybe the average income in, Windsor was like 35,000, for example. So the housing market would reflect that. But again, my renter's market was $100,000. So I would be able to acquire a property that the market is based off a $30,000 a year affordability and rent it out at $100,000 a year affordability. And that's kind of what I did. And I would find, cities, and like Windsor was the main one, where essentially there was a university, a strong presence of post-secondary education, and kind of capitalized on those gains. And I found that to be very active. And the other thing I thought about too is, if you guys remember, for you guys, like 2008 was a bad time, right, with the economic crash. But the one thing that did go up was post-secondary attendance, because as soon as someone loses a job, right, the first thing they do is they go back and retrain and requalify themselves in order to get a job. So the educational market goes up in those kinds of situations. So I'm like, here's this great opportunity, potentially like recession-proof. And I kind of invested in that. And obviously for the viewers, some of the other things I do is I have a couple restaurants and a couple different types of businesses and industries, because I want to diversify my money and make sure I was in a bunch of different markets. So I kind of dabbled in that a little bit, but the main thing has always been real estate. That's always what I go back to, and that's kind of like my bread and butter. So for the viewers out there, that's kind of my story, and that's how I got started. And fast forward to today, I have over 42 properties in Windsor alone, over 80 properties altogether throughout Canada, US, the Bahamas, things like that, right? I bought a bunch of property in different locations, and that's where I'm at today, man. So
it's absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
Now, for me, I'm going to be honest, when I came to this conference, I guess I can hold this. Yeah. When I came to this conference, I thought I was kind of a big hitter. Like, I came in a little arrogant. And I'm at just a little over 60 doors, and I'm cash flowing right around $100,000. Now, how many doors does that put you at, and what is your monthly cash flow?
Oh yeah, that's crazy, man. So let's talk about that. So let's just talk about Windsor, because that's basically what I do, which is student rentals. Just off my student rentals in the one city in Windsor, which is just over 42 properties, I cash flow. So doors is different. So how you count doors and how I count doors is a little bit different, because I rent it out by the room. So every room is a door to me. Every property has an average about 8 8 rooms. So I have over 300 doors,
Insane.
right? And my net cash flow, so if we want to talk about what I take home every month, after taxes, after income tax, after everything, after my mortgages, everything, like what's in my pocket at the end of the day is in the neighborhood of 100 grand a month. So
insane.
Yeah, man.
So just goes to show, when you think you're big stuff, bringing in 100 grand a year off your properties, you got this guy doing it every single month.
But like, not to take away, what you're doing is you're killing it, man. Like the stuff that you've got going on, you're totally crushing it. Like one of the value points for me in Vegas was definitely meeting you and hearing what you had to say and what you had going on. It was super impressive to me on that on that side. I found a market that was just a little bit better. That's all it was, man.
I love it. Now, the one thing I wanted to hit on is, you say a little bit better, but the reality is your market, you have caps on how fast you can raise rents.
Yes.
You don't have 1031 exchanges.
Yes.
You don't have loans that are longer than 5 years? You can't get 30-year fixed unless it's through someone.
Yeah, exactly. That's very true. So a lot of the stuff that we deal, like you can get mortgages that are 30-year amortizations, things like that are fixed. You can, but you're right. There's a lot of restrictions, man. A ton of restrictions is what allows you to do that. There's regulations on rooms. It's just finding there's a lot more red tape than there is in the States.
I guess one of the things that I found fascinating that really made me gravitate towards you is, in my market, I pride myself for getting some of the best returns.
Nice.
Like the other investors I talk with, everything else, I feel like when I can pull in properties, one of my best properties that I did a video about was a 29% cash on cash return. And so it's been good, but the thing that caught me so off guard is, after you've had this huge success with this complex, you didn't stop. You've gone on to get a construction company. You've gone on to find this incredible niche where you're getting, like 50% cash on cash return.
So break that down for you guys. They're probably hearing that and they're going like, what the man? So let me talk to you guys about this for a bit. So give you guys an idea about the Windsor market. So everything for me is by the bedroom, right? So let's do real quick numbers. Minimum wage in Ontario is about $14-15 an hour. If someone works about $30 an hour or 30 hours a week, right? A student works 30 hours a week, which is not crazy. That's pretty much what I worked when I was a student. Their disposable income is somewhere in the neighborhood about $1,500 a month. That's what they earn, right? So if you talk to any financial advisor, if you guys are familiar, about 40% of what you make should be going to your cost of living. Like that's the rule that everyone tells you. So 40%, that lands you somewhere in the neighborhood of about $800 a month, right? So I knew that like the ideal affordability for someone in that position would be $800 a month for an all-inclusive, I pay rent once or whatever. So I deducted the cost of food, which is usually about $200 for a student a month, right? Based on whatever, like booze and all the crazy shit students spend. So I'm like, I could really get $600 a month anywhere. And that's what people were getting. And it kind of matched. So I reverse engineered and I'm like, so I did that. And then I looked, what are the average rents in like some of the bigger cities? Like what's normal for a student? And that was the normal price. So I looked at this model, and I'm like, I can get $600 a room. And then that became my affordability margin. I knew that that's what people could afford. And where I landed in that was based on my product, supply and demand, and so many things that we can talk about for hours. But that's how I did the analysis of, I know I can get this. It's just how do I get that is based on me, what kind of product I put out there that makes them want to spend that. So for the Windsor market, it was really like all amenities, all inclusive, really, really nice places because nothing was nice. Everything was kind of, run down, like holes, leaky water pipes, like asbestos in the houses, and people were living like this. There was really no high-end places. So I was like, that's my ticket to get that 600. So one property, that's how I came up with my model. But anyways, one property to give you a perfect example. So let's talk about a 6-bedroom house that you can buy in Windsor for $150,000. Okay, so I buy it for $150,000. I assume a $30,000 renovation budget, guys. So that puts you all in at $180,000. Okay, you're gonna need, if you look at an 80 to 20%, like 80% ratio of what that looks like. So your mortgage is going to be on 180. I think it's somewhere in the neighborhood of like 144, 160,000. That's what you're going to get from the bank. You're going to get it at about, let's call it 5%. Let's do 5%. And the mortgage payment on that looks somewhere in the neighborhood of $800 a month. So you have $800 a month, right? That goes towards your mortgage. So if you guys are at home, write this stuff down. $800 a month in mortgage. You have property tax, which on this property breaks down to like $143 a month. So write that down. $143 a month for taxes. Insurance, house insurance for a single family, 5 to 6 bedrooms. You're looking about the neighborhood of like on the low end $80 to the high end $120. Let's call it $120 a month. So write that down. And then for expenses, so we do all inclusive. So you gotta look at more things than just those things. So NWIN, which is our hydro department, hydro and water. Yeah. So an average hydro bill, like on the high end, it's usually about $200. Your highest months are about $350. Let's just call it $400 a month, okay, for hydro. Gas, which is your heating and cooling, right? The highest bill you ever usually get is about $150. Let's just assume that every month you're spending $200. Throw that down, $200 for that. Maid service, let's assume $100 for maid service, okay? It's not that much. You can hire a maid that comes in for an hour every day. Or sorry, not every day, but an hour bi-weekly, which is $20 an hour. It's about $40. Let's call it 100. Let's double it. So write that down, $100 for maid service. And then I guess the last expenses, sorry guys, I'm not writing it down, so it's going off memory, but let's call it $100 for miscellaneous, so like expenses, stuff like that. So that gives you like an expense somewhere in the neighborhood. I might be wrong because I'm not writing it down, but I think it's somewhere in the neighborhood like $1,600 a month, something like that, guys, somewhere around $1,700. Let's go rents. So let's do bottom doomsday scenario. Like, oh my God, like this is the worst rents I'm gonna get. Assume I don't do any Airbnbs. Assume I don't employ any of the strategies that I apply. So let's do $600 for all the rooms because they're all above grade. So 6 times 6, $3,600. Well, I'll let you do the math. That gives you a cash flow of $1,700 a month on a $180,000 investment. So.
Definitely. And the thing there are two things I want you to hit on that you talked about that I just absolutely love. One is your view on buying for appreciation. Yeah. And the other is on looking for the cheapest labor or work to get things done. Because those are two things you talked to me about that I loved what you had to say. So maybe hit on those.
Cool, man. Yeah, for sure. So I think appreciation, like I don't want to knock any investment strategies because everyone, like sometimes it works for people, sometimes it doesn't, whatever. If you've got your own thing going, if you're investing in appreciation, it's working for you, good for you. I just think appreciation to me is like gambling, right? Just assuming that there's no cap or no end is insane to me. It just doesn't make any sense. You might as well just go, we're in Vegas, go to the Bellagio, man, and put all that money on black and you got just as good of a chance, right? So like the way I look at it for appreciation, why I think it's wild, let me get into detail about that, man, is that I look at real estate like a business. If I was buying a McDonald's, let's use that for a perfect example. You tell me you've got a burger, that's not McDonald's, but like a burger shack, right? And you're telling me your burger shack, you bought the building for this amount, whatever, and after all said and done, you bring in negative $100 a month for your burger shack. And then you pitched me and said, hey, John, I'm the buyer. This is an investment purchase, right? And you're selling me your business. You should buy my business for $100,000 more than what I paid for it. You're not only going to do negative $75 a month, you're going to do probably negative 50 or whatever. But guess what? Your building is going to be worth a lot one day, so you can sell this business to somebody else for a bigger negative cash flow, right? And that to me is like that net profit. That's cash flow to me. That if you're negative in that zone and you are already negative cash flowing or barely cash flowing, you're tapping out the affordabilities of your renters. That means that your renters, man, they can't afford to pay any more because as an investor, you would get the higher rents. So if you're even at a point where you're almost breaking even, or like some of the people in the GTA or where I'm from, where they're literally negative cash flowing, it's wild because you're in a situation where you've already maxed out the affordability of your renters. They can't afford to pay any more rent. That's why you're negative every month. And you're thinking that like this is going to appreciate, so someone's going to buy this rental investment property for you at a bigger deficit than what you already have. That's crazy for me. That's why I think appreciation is nuts, man. Like it's one thing to think about like a personal home when like if I had a personal home that I built, which is like a nice, beautiful home, and it's not an investment, but it's a personal home I'm going to live in, it's an emotional purchase, then maybe there's appreciation there because maybe you want to live in that beautiful home and you're willing to pay extra to have that home, right? That's a different game. But if you're doing an investment, if this is what you do, guys, if you're in the rental business, if you own duplexes, multifamilies, I don't care what it is, and your business is having renters, then you should be buying in situations where like that when you pay your rents, your net profit is crazy. If you're negative cash flowing, you've maxed out that affordability. It makes no sense. So for me, man, like it's cash flow first, everything else is secondary, man. And that's how I kind of look at real estate.
I love it. And that is right where I'm at on things. Unfortunately, my cash flows just aren't as big as yours. But we're going to get there, dang it.
Yeah, you're crushing it, man. And sorry, you had another question.
So the other question was, we were talking about construction, and I think I asked you something along the lines of, do you find cheap labor for it? Or just talking about, finding cheap work.
Yeah.
And just your view on that, I love, because you just do things right.
Yeah, man. Like, so for me, it all comes back down to the thing that I learned from my first partner, man. Count pennies, you'll lose dollars. So there's certain things you want to keep in house or you can find cheap labor for, like think about drywall, stuff like that. Those are things you can kind of do. But when it comes to like foundation work or whatever, that's the opposite. Let me rephrase that. Drywall, stuff like that, you can do yourself, but really the cost of doing it, you should just sub it out, man. Let other people do it, and don't count the like dollar a board that you're saving by doing it yourself or getting cheap later, and that could be potentially like a really job. Just pay that price and get it done right. Like there's certain items that make sense to in-house. Like for me, we just had a joint venture partner. We were doing a property in Windsor where essentially the foundation was totally shot. It was brick and mortar foundation. All the mortar was there was nothing there. You could there's 3 layers of brick. You could just kick this brick off, man. That's how bad it was. So what we did is we shored up the house, right? We put like 2x6s all around, and then we supported with 2 beams and a footing. And then we basically put the house, like it was sitting on these 2x6s, which allowed us to demo the existing foundation, hydrovac it, which is a really fancy way of saying, like, think about like a power pressure washer. That's how we dug the trenches, and a vacuum sucked all the debris. And that's how we trench without getting heavy machinery in there. And then what we did is we re-poured a cement foundation, new block foundation, and then dropped the house on it and pulled the 2x6s out. That's a really simple way of explaining it. But if you were to get a quote for that in Windsor, you're looking at like a $50,000-$60,000 quote. To do it internally, it costs us like $13,000, something like that, right? So that kind of stuff makes sense. So you got to optimize and manage your money well. But for the most part, like, don't cheap out. Don't count pennies. Like, we're looking at a cash flow long-term game. And once you refinance your property, if you're doing things right, most of that's going to be incorporated into your mortgage and to your access. So if you've got like a $100,000 budget in renovations, just look at what a mortgage would be like, that $100,000 reno plus your purchase price, and build that in. If you're still cash flowing thousands of dollars, you shouldn't be focused on that, because only 20% of what you're spending is actually coming out of your pocket, because the other 80% is being financed out through a lender anyways. So it's just the time difference of you waiting until that gets to that point, right? So don't cheap out, man. Like, that's the way I say it. It's super big. A lot of people will spend a lot of time trying to do a renovation for 30 instead of 40, right? Which makes no sense to me. That's a difference of $2,000 out of your pocket. Let me like clarify that. If you want to do renovations for $30,000 by saving, doing it yourself, maybe hiring some cheap contractors, cheap laborers, and you could get it done by someone who's qualified, who has a reputation, but it'll cost you $40,000. Okay, that's a $10,000 difference. You're gonna refinance. Chances are you're gonna get at least 80%. So if the new valuation of your house is everything you have into it, which is crazy, usually it'll be much higher. Assuming they value at what you have into it. Okay, 80% of that you're gonna pull through a mortgage. So that means that, guys, 80% of 10 grand, $8,000 is gonna go be built into your mortgage. That's $2,000 out of your pocket. Why f around, man? Just like, let's spend that money and get it in. And then if you're gonna cash flow thousands, because your cash flows on a mortgage, let's talk about that. $8,000 increase in the amount you're borrowing at whatever. That's like a couple, like that's nothing on your mortgage. That's like $10-$20. It's not gonna hurt your cash flow. It's not gonna break you. It's not even gonna affect you. You're not even gonna notice, right? Like, you just having fun and giving your guy who cuts your grass a $10 bonus a month is the same difference of you getting renovations done right, man. So just kind of don't think about those things. You got to manage your money well, and that's where it comes into where, like, if something costs you in-house like a $13,000 versus $40,000, that's a big differential. Like, that's something you want to consider. But for the most part, don't focus on that stuff, man. Focus on the end goal, right? So
I love it.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, last question, then I'll let you get going. But
cool,
I want to know, for new investors, you've seen so many guys come through, and we don't have time to talk about it all today, but
yeah,
you've literally helped dozens of guys to invest and to get into this game.
Yeah.
What is the biggest piece of advice you would give someone who's trying to get in, as far as maybe mistakes people make, or
Yeah.
what do you want them to know before they jump into it?
It's all about taking action. That's number one, and getting in there and getting involved. Surround yourself with people that are doing it, right? Like watching this video is great. I invest in a completely different market. So, if you're in the area where Chandler's at, you should probably hang out with guys like you and kind of surround yourself with people that are doing investments in that area and kind of get some knowledge through that, but also execution. Make sure just don't. Paralysis by analysis is a big thing. Don't do that. And it doesn't matter. If you guys are out there, you don't have a lot of capital, a lot of borrowing power. Listen, there's deals out there for everybody. Like we talked about in one of the things that I did. I got a common thing that I get is vendor takebacks. It's called VTBs, where essentially the seller holds the mortgage. And I can get property sometimes with no money in, no money down, man, just by talking and networking. So just know that at the end of the day, it doesn't matter whether you have $1 million in the bank or if you have $10 in the bank. There's a way for you to get in real estate. Just learn the strategy that is going to get you there, and don't be afraid to kind of venture out and find those ways. And VTBs is like a common thing. I do them all the time. They're more common than you think, where the seller is willing to hold the mortgage with zero money down, right? So yeah, man, that's all I got to say is just go after it. So
I love it. That
Cool.
is perfect. Well, guys, if you enjoyed the video, push the like button, subscribe to the channel, and make sure you catch the others. I'm going to try and get some more incredible people like this, but wow, that was just absolutely incredible, and I look forward to seeing you guys next time.